Hey everyone, it's Eric back again. I've just taken delivery of my new Hornby HST new measurement train power cars from AGR Model Store. So I thought I would do a little comparison between the railroad and super detail versions and TTS Sound versus full fat DCC Sound. So in the new measurement train power cars, I've actually got a Loksound V5 decoder in both, with an EM1 and iPhone speaker combination in each power car. The railroad power cars have got the Hornby TTS HST sound with a single iPhone speaker in each. So I just thought I'd do a little comparison and show you sort of what you're getting for the money and why I would recommend just paying the extra and going for the proper decoders. The TTS ones do serve a purpose. They are a budget way in for DCC Sound, excuse the wind, but you just get so much more functionality with a Loksound V5, or if you want to use Zimo, and a Zimo chip. But yeah, so I thought I'd just walk you through it and show you sort of what the differences are really, so stay tuned. So we got the new measurement train power cars here. One of them is on the lock programmer at the minute. You can see complete with wonky decals. I've seen a lot of complaints about this with this set lately, but what can you do? It's very minor. Yeah, so that's on the lock programmer at the minute on the little test track, because I'm currently installing the sound file. So you can see here it's writing the sound file on. This is the lock programmer software. This takes about half an hour, 45 minutes to reblow one decoder. Partly because V5s just have so much memory on them that you can cram way more sounds and better quality sound into them, so it just takes a long time to actually put it on the decoder itself. So this is the powered car here, this is the dummy. The dummy is already fitted with sound, because I don't know if you would have seen it on my Instagram, but the decoder and speaker setup was in my GWR HST power car. So I have one random power car, the old common power car, but I've taken it out of that to put in this because it was just sort of a bit of a test bed. So yeah, they're gonna both be fitted with Loksound V5s with Legomanbiffo sound, and they should sound awesome. So hopefully this hurries up and then we can get them on the track and have a little test. Whether this will interest anyone or not, but the sound has just finished uploading onto the V5 decoder. So just on the lock programmer software, I'm just going to quickly change a couple of things. I thought someone might find this interesting. So we've got the address here is currently 125. I want to use a long address, so I'm going to change that to 4300. Easy to remember, class 43. Where are we? Brake settings. I do have an active brake function usually, but I'll leave it off for now. A function mapping is the fun one. If you look on here when it loads, you can actually, so you can move the sounds around. You can only do this with a lock programmer, I believe. I don't know if you can do it with just changing CVs. You'd be there probably a month doing that. But things like the horns, the horn obviously on F2, F3 as you'd expect from most models, but you can say put them on F10 if you like. So, but the way I do it is normally, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through this. I'm going to change it so that you got the horns F2 and F3. F4 I always have the brakes, so braking sounds, which Biffo seems to put on F5, but I normally put them on F4, and then on logic functions I put brake 1. So that means that when you press F4, if I change this, take the door slams off and put brake application in on F4. So that means now, once I save it, if I press F4, it will instead play the brake application noise, and it will also activate the active braking on the loco. So yeah, it's the sort of stuff you can do. So even though like things like the compressor here is set on here, so it only works on when the chip is in the forward direction. So basically only one power car will have a compressor running at the same time, at once, sorry. Now in real life they would both run at the same time, so what I'm going to do is set that to ignore. So when you press F7, no matter what direction the power car's in, the compressor will run. So obviously this is more just because I used to work on trains, so I know some of this stuff, whereas someone that does the sound files, like Biffo for example, or whoever else does them, they might not know some of this stuff. So things like the horns being directional, he puts that on, but the compressor's not quite right. So things like that you can change with this, which is really cool. So I'm just basically going through and sorting all my fleet out with all this. It's quite interesting, really. Motor settings, I put all of my units to 175 because I want them to all drive pretty much the same. So 175 top speed, minimum speed number 1, and it's just got a standard 45-degree curve. Well, it's not curve, straight line for the motor settings. But yeah, you can even change the volume of individual sounds and all sorts of stuff on here. So I thought I'd just give you a quick look. So I'm gonna go away now and finish this off, and then when we come back we'll do a little comparison of the super detailed versus the railroad power cars. So here we are then, we've got the railroad power cars on the left, we've got the Hornby super detailed power cars on the right, with all the bodies off, as you can see, just for a quick look. So the things that are quite obviously noticeable, if you discount the fact that the railroad power cars have been modified for extra lighting, obviously you've got quite a big printed circuit board on the super detail version. The super detail version also has a centrally mounted motor with flywheels and drive shafts, enabling both bogies to be driven. Whereas on the railroad version, which you can see here, it's got a single motor, which is actually a bogie motor in the back bogie of the power car, which also leads to issues when you're pulling a decent length train, because you just haven't got the weight to pull it with. Now, talking of weight, the power chassis, it's not exactly light, but when you pick up the super detail version, it's a massive difference. There's just a lot more weight there. It's all metal chassis, as you can see there. It's all metal with the sides obviously all boxed in as well. The railroad one, the power chassis is still a plastic chassis. It just has this large weight in the sensor to try and weigh it down and give it some adhesion, but it's not great. DCC wise, these both come with 8-pin sockets. The power chassis on the railroad version comes with an 8-pin socket, which is normally down here. The dummy version, I believe, doesn't come with anything, as far as I'm aware, because it doesn't actually come with any lighting, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I saw Gary at Cheeky Tech fit lighting into one of these because it didn't have any at all. So obviously this has had an 8-pin socket fitted. It's not my work, so don't judge. But yeah, it sort of limits you a little bit there. Now you can see I've got the decoders installed in the super detail versions at the minute. We've got, as I said, Loksound V5 8-pin decoders. The power chassis, I've got it black tacked into the roof, and there's that insulation tape is only on the top there just to stop the stay alive wires from shorting on any of the PCB. It's not insulated taped on the back. It's just on the front to protect that, because I might think about adding a stay alive at a later date, just in case. I thought I'd leave the wires on. And this is the only place I could actually fit the decoder and get the body back on, because you can see I've got an EM1 bass speaker in the back here in the guards van. That fits in there quite snug. That's again black tacked in. And on the power car, you can see here I've got a sugarcube speaker also, which is in the guards van, and that all fits together just about, and it sounds pretty good. Now on the dummy car, I've got also a V5 decoder, but that is underneath the PCB. If I just move that to the side, oops, it's underneath the weight. So I take the weight out, you can just see it hiding underneath there, because the fuel tank, there's a bit of a void where there's nothing in there. So I fit the decoder in there. We've got, instead of the sugarcube, we've got a single iPhone speaker on this one, just to sort of test the difference, really, see if I notice any difference between that and the sugarcube that's in the powered car. And we've got the same EM1 bass speaker in the guards van on the roof, black tacked in. So when the body's on, you can barely really see those, but they make a nice difference to the noise. It's more quality than anything. You get a bit of bass out of them, but it's nothing compared to an EM2. But yeah, it just sounds quite good. The buffers on the super detail version are part of the chassis, and they're a lot nicer, whereas this on the railway version, obviously someone has made this is a kit. It's still quite a nice job, but it's attached to the body themselves. But yeah, the chassis basically they're very basic on the railroad version, and they don't ride very well. But we'll put the bodies back on, and I'll also put the TTS chips in these cars, and then we'll have a better look on the outside of them. So here we are then. We have got the railroad power car at the top and the super detail power car at the bottom. These are both the dummy cars for each set. Now, first impressions, you can see from a distance, they probably don't look too dissimilar. But it's when you come up close, you notice all the differences. Now, bear in mind, this one is a repaint, not done by myself. I bought it like this. Bit of a bad buy, really, but I just fancy trying out TTS Sound, and these came with the chips. So if we start, I suppose, with the front, you can see it's quite similar, but the window glazing on the super detailed version is nice and flush and very well finished, whereas on the railroad version it sits right in the door. Also, you've got the separate handrails, which you can see here, compared to the molded versions. You've got all the bolt heads around the cab, because on a HST the cabs do bolt on and off because it's a fiberglass cab. Obviously up here it's just they use sealant to hide it, but around the bottom, yeah, these are bolt heads. So it's nice that they pick those out. You've got obviously the extra detail with the fire system pull handles. Also, which is quite nice, although it's a bit pointless, is the doors open. I don't know if you can really see that if I push it with the screwdriver. You can see the doors open. They do open fully, but they are sprung, so they don't stay open. So in my mind, it's a bit of a pointless feature, but it's there. So what can you do? Bogies wise, the bogies aren't too bad on the railway version. You can see, I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but the detailing is all obviously still molded, but it's picked out a lot better on the super detail version. So things like the dampers, they stick out much more, rather than on the railroad version. They're sort of like, oh, it's kind of hard to explain, really, like half relief, if you like. Whereas on these, they properly are a separate almost piece. So yeah, that sort of gives you a better idea. You can see they're like almost sunk into the bogie frames on the railroad version. You also have got the extra electrical boxes for the wheel slip equipment, which I will paint up, because it's a bit annoying that they've just done the whole bogie black, especially for the price you're paying. Because things like the WSP wheel slip boxes should be orange. The dampers are normally a grey sort of colour when they're new. You've got the bogie retaining slings, which should be silver, as well as various other little bits. But yeah, the railroad version isn't too bad. It's just a little bit more basic, really. Detail, like I say, it's just more to it, and more sort of little bolt heads and things like that you notice, and better in proportion knife guards. The wheels also, you might have noticed, you get brake discs on the super detail version, which you don't get on the railroad version. But again, other than that, the main difference, if I flip them over, is the railroad version, the wheels just sort of sit in a cutout. They don't have proper bearings, you can see, so they can just sort of move side to side freely. And I don't know how that will be for longevity, whether they'll last like that, because they've got no sort of bearing surface. Whereas on the detailed versions, they're more as you'd expect with modern rolling stock, where they've got the pinpoint bearings. And yeah, just a bit of a nicer setup. I don't know what I've picked up there, a bit of fluff. But yeah, bogie wise, so they're not too bad. They're just, I feel like these will run a lot nicer, as well as easier to get a back-to-back gauge in if you have any problems with derailments. Battery boxes. The battery box on the super detail version is shorter than the railroad by the looks of it, which it looks a lot more in proportion with the rest of the power car. You can see here you've got all the detail, that you've got the compressor, which is on the back side here. It's all separate parts, whereas on the railroad version it's all one block. If I turn it over, You can see the compressor there is in the same sort of thing. It's all basically one block of plastic, which from a glance doesn't look too bad, but when you compare it to this, it's a massive improvement. You see it just picks it out nicely. Again, it all needs a bit of paint to it to sort of separate all the pipe work and things like that, but it's not too bad an effort. When you consider how old the railroad sort of tooling is, it's really not too bad at all. Same again with the rear bogies, the same setup. You've got the air tanks at the back here behind the bogies. On the railroad version, they sort of stick down a bit sort of in the way in your face. They don't look bad though. The super detail version, you can see here, it's got the 3-phase cable socket, which you don't get on the railroad version. Again, this should be bright orange. I don't know why Hornby don't do things like this, but HSTs should have these little connectors on for connecting the 3-phase supply, electric chain heat supply throughout the train. I noticed the new sliding door coaches have these as well, which is a nice feature. But other than that, on the side, the grills, you can see on the super detail version, they are hollow, as they should be in real life for the cooler group. On the railroad version, they're sort of blocked off. It's just moulded into the plastic, so it doesn't look very good. I suppose with a bit of weathering, you could sort of disguise that a little, but you can see the difference straight away. That's probably the biggest difference you notice when putting them side to side. This really does help. The guard door, there's not that much in it really. I mean, the sliding door mechanism is still moulded in on the super detail version. You've got obviously the separately fitted handrail, and you've got the handles nicely picked out, but the main difference, again, as you would have found on the front end, is the glazing. A nice flush glazing here, and on the railroad version you've got the split glass, and it's sunk in a lot deeper, and the basically the definition of the detailing just isn't as nice. It's all it looks a bit sort of rough and ready, other than if you take away the paint. That's almost it, aside from the grills, which is probably easier if I just turn them up actually. The body side grills are a lot more pronounced on the super detailed power cars. You can see it straight away, they're just better quality and it looks a lot more sort of crisp. The roof itself, the back end of the roof, you don't really notice much of a difference. Again, it's just a little more crisp, but the railroad version isn't bad here at all. Moving on, you got the cooler groups. This is the brush cooler group, I think, which the East Coast units and East Midlands units have, things like that. I believe this is based on the old Marsden cooler group, which is what they had when they had a Valenta fitted. We've got the roof hatches, which these in real life are made of fiberglass. So when they're clean and brand new, they're actually sort of translucent to let light in, which is why Hornby have picked this out in this colour, because this is more sort of a fiberglass-ish colour. So when you open these doors up, obviously you can see the engine right beneath, but when they're closed, it's designed to let a little bit of light into the engine room. On the railroad version, they don't come with that. It's just a plain sort of door, which you could paint up. I think Mr. Cheeky Tech Gary has done that on his, which makes quite a nice difference. Again, it's just picked out a little bit nicer on this power car, the handles and things like that, it's a bit neater. Silencers are a bit different, but then this is supposed to be an earlier power car, so there are differences there anyhow. The only thing I've done on this is I've drilled them out to let a bit of the sound out from the decoder, because whereas on this power car you've got the body side grills that are hollow, on this one there's nowhere really for the sound to escape, so that's why I've drilled those out to let the sound out from the decoder. And there should be an exhaust deflector here as well, but that's missing for some reason. I think it's just from where someone's painted it before and probably lost it. But yeah, the roof isn't bad at all. You can't really complain at it compared to the super detail one. Obviously there are subtle differences, but it's not massive. It's more just this is a lot finer detail, and it's just a bit sharper lines, and obviously the paint's better. But yeah, you can't really knock this one down for the price with the roof. It's mainly the body sides and the bogies. But yeah, so that's basically that. If I turn you around to the front, Now, obviously, bear in mind that this is a modified power car. It wasn't originally a new measurement train power car, but you can see it's got the older front end with the different light clusters. The main sort of difference that you get is the super detail version. You can see here it actually has the horns behind the grille as you would have in real life, whereas this is just a plain grille. Windscreen is a bit nicer on the detailed version, and the wiper is a separate item rather than molded into the windscreen plastic. But yeah, other than that, they're fairly similar. Again, obviously you've just got the bolts, the little bolts around the bottom of the cab, and the door isn't as well picked out as you would get on a super detailed model, which has the bottom valance. But yeah, that's it really. If I just show you the actual power cars, then we'll see the difference there. So here's the power cars next to each other. Then you can see the super detail versions on the left, the railroad on the right. So as mentioned before, the super detail version has all-wheel power with drive shafts and flywheels to give nice smooth running, whereas the railroad version just has the rear bogie powered. You can see the bogies are similar to the dummy style, whereas they don't have proper bearings and things like that, which doesn't help with smooth running. They don't roll very freely in comparison to the later stuff. But otherwise, there's not a lot to it, other than, again, what I said about the compressor moulding and things like that. The main thing that I don't like about the railway version is the way the body comes off. These screws, they're almost like wood screws. They're horrible. If you try and put these in, they're nasty to install, whereas the super detail power cars have 4 screws. You've got 2 there and 2 there, and they're just a nicer quality. You can just tell when you take them apart, they're just a much nicer model. But yeah, other than that, that's it really. So I suppose we'll put them on the track and have a look at them running, and then compare the decoders. So we've got both sets of power cars set up. What I'll do now is I will first start up the railroad versions, which have the TTS decoders. I'll just play both the horns and then shut them down again. After that, I'll start up the super detail versions, which have got Loksound V5 in. And then again, I'll just use the horns, give you an idea of the sound quality, and then again shut them down. And then I'll probably do a few clips of them running, and then we'll summarise at the end. So here's the railroad version. So you can hear there, it's not a bad sound file, but it's quite tinny. The quality isn't amazing. It's a lot better with these speakers than the standard ones, however. But what can you say for 60 quid? So here's the full fat V5s. They do start up individually as well. The rear power car will start up, then the front. So you can really hear the difference there. As I said, the TTS is very tinny and the quality is a lot lower. These, of course, have got the bassy EM1 speakers in, mixed with a sugarcube and an iPhone speaker on each. And it's not so much the overall bass difference, it's more just the quality in the sound is a massive difference. Obviously, as you would have noticed on these, you get the playable horns as well. So they're quite handy rather than the standard two-tones you get on the TTS. So yeah, let's get them running on the layout and do a couple shots. So thanks for watching, everyone. Sorry it was a bit long-winded. It went on a bit longer than I thought it would. I don't know if you can tell in the videos, but the quality of the Loksound equipped locos is a lot better than the TTS. Obviously you get a lot more functionality, as I mentioned before. The only thing is, on camera it doesn't come across so well because the Loksound locos are so loud. It doesn't sound probably as good on video, but in person it's a massive difference. You just have to take my word on that. In my opinion, it's definitely worth spending the extra money on the proper decoders and going for full-blown Loksound or Zimmo if you can find, as I said, a suitable sound file for one. You get a lot more functionality as well. You can just play with the settings a lot easier, and you can move the sound functions around to suit what you want, providing you've got a lock programmer, of course. Again, the price, TTS, you're looking at 60 quid plus probably a tenner on a pair of iPhone speakers, so single in each one. The Loksound decoders retail for about £120 each with a file, and they come with a sugarcube speaker. If you were then to add on the EM1 speakers as well, they're about an extra 20 quid each, so it's obviously a massive difference. But for my layout where everything is ESU decoder powered, and eventually I want to automate it to make use of all the functions and stuff, and just have all the locos drive the same and be the same sort of functionality, for me it's worth it. But everyone's different, so I suppose just let me know in the comments what you think, what your opinions are, if you've got TTS or full-blown V5 sound in yours. Let me know what you think of them, and I suppose we'll see you in the next one. So thanks for watching.